Hey guys, welcome to Titanium Tuesdays on Propelio TV. I'm RJ Bates. You have to bear with me. I forgot what I was doing there for a second. It was a long break over the new year.
It's tough to get back in the swing of things.
I've got my buddy TJ Kosen with me today.
How are you guys doing?
And this is our first show in 2019, the new year. So many things have already happened in the new year, including
Been a fun year, I think.
Yeah, including Ryan Harper's go-to football team, the Alabama Crimson Tide, just getting absolutely demolished last night. How'd you feel about that, Ryan?
Roll Tide!
How long did you live tweet that last night?
First half.
First half. The only part that was actually a football game. A couple other things that we have going on is the Dallas Cowboys won a playoff game for like the first time.
That was pretty.
In what, two
I don't know.
decades?
Forever.
Our lifetime?
Forever, yeah.
Yeah. So that's fun. And then also, I think we've got some real estate investing topics we're going to talk about today.
I thought we were talking about Legs Day and
Legs Day?
titanium or something.
Metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Platinum
heavy
and
metal,
titanium.
Something like that. I don't know.
So for y'all that don't know, my company's Titanium Investments. Yours is?
Our main company is actually Sherlock Houses, but we do a lot of branding under Platinum and Real Estate Mastermind on Facebook.
Yep.
So it's not competitors at all. We just kind of bumped into the name and kind of ran with it, and it's kind of cool. So we love it.
Why don't you share that story about what you thought about me the first time you found out our company name was Titanium Investments?
So I thought you were a fantastic dude. I love you, man. What are you talking about? Now, it's kind of, about a year ago, I guess, where am I at? This one?
That one.
Made kind of a conscious effort to start doing more like public PR in the company and get more just known in the industry. And to do that, we figured we need a kind of catchy name. So I thought, since I have titanium in my back, I thought, something titanium. I don't know, Titanium Investments, Titanium Mastermind, Titanium something. So I'm getting on the computer, Googling titanium whatever in real estate, and this sexy beast pops up, and I'm like, well, shoot, someone's already got that. I can't compete with a beard, so I got to think of a different metal. And my friend of mine said, oh, why don't we do platinum? Like, it sounds kind of tacky, sounds kind of over the top. I love it. Let's do it. It's real estate.
I love it. I love it when you came out with your group, Platinum and whatever it is,
Yeah.
Platinum, and I saw it and I was like, Platinum, that's kind of cool. I was like, as a person who's also branded in the metal world, I guess. And then I heard your story and I was like, I told Cassie, my partner, I was like, I'm wondering if he actually wanted the name Titanium, so
Yeah.
it's funny how that works out.
And
So,
we didn't even meet for probably 6 months after that.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh shit, RJ's gonna be pissed at me for trying to be like copycat or something.
Right.
And he's super cool. So
So we got some good people joining us this morning. Elizabeth, Matt Smith, Christine, thank you guys for joining us. Joseph, thank you guys. Jason Ratcliffe. So we're going to go into kind of diversifying yourself in your real estate investing business, but also focusing on one core strategy and mastering that, because that's something both of us have done in our businesses. And we think that's very important for kind of the real estate investing climate moving forward into 2019. So let's go back to kind of how you got your start and what you mean by focusing on like one core strategy in your business.
yeah, absolutely. I've been doing real estate really since 2006. So right at the top of the market, which is the best time to get into real estate. And I like to tell people that I really kind of made all the mistakes that there were to make, and that's how I stumbled across being successful. So whatever I do, don't necessarily follow that as an example, but maybe learn from it in certain respects.
Right.
But along the way, built several successful companies. The one that we had in 2006, we purchased, renovated, and leased up, stabilized 210 apartment units in Memphis, Tennessee. And basically the project itself is successful. The lease up, the management, the stabilization was successful. The stuff that you can't control is the market, obviously.
Right.
So that's a different conversation entirely, of course. But basically what I learned through that process is, in order to really be successful in the business, you really need to start with one in business, I guess in business, school or business world or corporate world or whatever. They kind of call it a core competency. So I think it's important, if you want to be successful in real estate investing, to start with the core competency and really build it from there and do something, build it with on that foundation, and then you can expand into kind of vertical and horizontal integrations. And I think we've both done that in our respective businesses as we sit now.
So for right now, if we have people that are watching this, they're either getting started or they're wanting to get started in the business. How do you come up with that core competency, and what do you think is the best route for people to take in 2019?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing you don't do, especially if you're brand new, is you don't have goals. You have kind of goals, I guess, bigger than where you are, obviously, but you don't just chase a whole bunch of shiny objects, which is kind of funny with titanium and platinum, right? Don't do shiny object syndrome. But we see so many investors in construction, on the construction side and on the real estate side, so many investors that, oh, well, I want to go do flips, and I want to do wholesales, and I want to do
rentals, owner financing, right,
and all this other stuff. And man, I want to get into apartments and do multifamily. Nothing wrong with that. You can get a lot of money in any one of those things. But if you're just chasing the shiny object, you don't really have a foundation of understanding in the market and in the business.
Well, I think that happens a lot in today's day and age with social media.
Absolutely.
Podcasts, shows like this. I mean, you can have people come on or listen to podcasts, and one week it's this person's an expert in owner financing, and you listen to it and it sounds so amazing, and it's like, why am I not doing that? And then the next week you'll have another guest on the podcast that is wholesaling 200 deals a year.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to
why
think,
am I not doing that? Yeah.
Why can't I wholesale 200 deals and owner finance 1,000 properties?
Yeah.
You know, and I've fallen victim to that before.
I think we all do.
Right.
I mean, we try to hustle 25/8 or whatever, right, guys?
Right.
But in reality, you only have so many hours in a day and so much you can do physically. And at the same time, there's only so much you can outsource at each stage of development on the business process. You got to kind of master something, or at least get a competency in something before you can outsource it to someone else to have an understanding of how it works.
So what were some of the steps that you took in your business to come up with the first core competency or the first strategy that you mastered?
You know, I guess going back to 2006, really, with the apartments, kind of got my feet. And again, don't do what I did. But we had a focus. We were in multifamily. We were doing a big renovation project, and in that we basically segregated different management aspects. But we understood that we were in multifamily. So with that, we knew everything about the submarket that we were in as much as we could. And then we built basically the product that we had, which was the stabilization and management of the property, and that was our focus. I didn't look at flips for a couple years after that, because in fact my first flip kind of scared the crap out of me. Because when you're doing apartments, when you're doing something big, it's all the same stuff. You're putting the same carpet in 100 and something units, you're putting the same fridge in, and you can really leverage buying the product or buying the thing. When you're doing a flip, man, you got to know what's selling in this neighborhood that's not selling in that neighborhood. What price point are we at? What's wrong with this house that wasn't wrong with the last house that we don't even know about?
Right.
If you go into a distressed apartment deal, you know there's a bunch of shit wrong with it, so you just fix the stuff that's wrong with it.
Right.
And there's not as many unknowns on the individual unit basis.
Right. So for us, when we first got started, we were coming from the construction background, but we did our first ever property was a single family flip.
Yeah.
And I realized, for me personally, this was not going to be what I wanted from real estate investing, because I wanted to not be a contractor, and flipping houses was essentially just being a contractor for yourself.
Absolutely.
So that's when we chose wholesaling. That was enabling me to analyze numbers, run numbers, and more focus on the real estate side of the business compared to the construction side. So we really focused on mastering wholesaling.
And I really think that's, you look at the big guys that we love to hate in town, the big wholesalers that have been around for a decade, that are doing huge volume. What do? They do wholesaling. Right. And that doesn't mean that you can't, as an individual, kind of do stuff that's correlated a little bit, but they really focus on one thing. Well, we were talking before the show, weren't we, about we both come from a bit of a construction background, even in DFW, and compare maybe real estate investing to construction. Yep. Who are the biggest kind of construction guys we know? They have a single product. It doesn't mean that basically it's not sophisticated. There's nothing special about it. It doesn't mean they're dumb. It doesn't mean that they don't know how to do something else. It means that they get really, really good at doing one thing, and then they branch out. Right. So roofing's a great example. It's got good margins. You can leverage it. It's one product. It's either pretty much on or it's not on. And it's either done right or it's not done right. There's not a lot of ambiguity.
Well, I think just in the past couple of years here in DFW specifically, we've seen Jamie Waite come
Absolutely.
out as, he's the HVAC hero. I mean,
Yeah.
he is the guy. Everybody knows him here. I mean, you see posts in the Facebook groups, hey, I need an HVAC specialist. Everybody's tagging him, and it could very easily be people that have probably never even hired him.
Absolutely.
But he's specialized in it. He's become an expert, and he's branded himself as the expert.
No, absolutely.
And so now his business is blowing up.
And he does do correlating stuff now. So whether they're
Right.
getting into plumbing or they're getting
Yep.
into, obviously they do the self-storage with Dave Heel.
Right.
But they start with the core competency. What is the business model? And
Yep.
and again, just because RJ started with wholesaling and I started with kind of construction and multifamily doesn't mean that you have to start there. I have plenty of friends in the market that start with flips.
Yep.
Honestly, I kind of think they're nuts. But I know some people that have been very successful starting off because they want to flip and because they love
Yep.
it.
Some of the most successful investors that I know, like Luke Weber and Don Costa from across the country, I mean, those guys, they solely focus on flips because that's what they were good at. They were
Right.
good at developing systems and relationships with contractors and to go out and do that. And now they've branched into other things like wholesales. So Jared Weaver says most wannabe investors and agents have no core competency. I would agree with that to a certain extent. I mean, sometimes what happens is that, like what we're talking about, that shiny object syndrome can really make you look like you have no core competency because you neglect it.
Exactly.
If maybe you should focus on wholesaling, but then you decide to go out and flip some, even if it's one or two houses. I mean, I'm sure you've had a couple of flips that have gone wrong. They can
Sideways, upside down.
They
Absolutely.
can consume your life and your business.
Well, and which deals are the easiest? They're the ones that honestly make you the most money and give you the least headache.
Right.
Now, once in a while, you make a couple quick bucks on something easy too, but realistically, the ones that you lose money on or the ones that are the most hassle, you're there every day, pounding it out. And I'm sure you've experienced the same thing.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your construction background. And so you actually have a contracting business.
Yeah, yeah, basically. So, kind of a long story. Again, don't do it the way I did it. So, been in real estate investing again since '06. I moved out to Texas in 4.5 years ago, I guess, whenever that was. And we were doing a couple of flips here, kind of getting ourselves established in the area.
Right.
And had a little trip and fall where I broke my back and shattered some bones in my spine. So anyone that has seen that can see my story on Facebook, I guess. And that obviously set us back a little bit. We were in a couple flips and ended up losing money on one, breaking even on another, and making a little bit of money on the other one. Because at that point, what happened was, what's Ryan doing? I think he's pulling up pictures. Anyway, yeah, it's back there somewhere. Anyway, what happened at that point was nothing else mattered except for me learning how to walk again. So our real estate business, everything got put on pause, and we just covered our bills and kind of went our way.
How big was your team when that happened?
We were just getting established in Dallas, so we had 2 GCs that we were working with that were pretty decent. And again, we only had 3 flips going at the time.
Right.
And just kind of getting going out here. Anyways, after that, came back to Dallas and weren't exactly broke, but just honestly kind of burned out from real estate, a little tired, and decided, okay, we need to do something to make some money. So what does someone that was just paralyzed 6 months ago do? They go start a roofing company and a construction company that caters to investors, because that makes all kinds of sense. So we blew that up, actually. We ended up doing, I think, about $1 million in our first year, and did that for a couple of years while we had 1 or 2 flips kind of going in-house at the same time. But it was, we had shiny object syndrome, where we were chasing too many different things.
So when you say you were catering towards investors, were you also doing
Absolutely.
like insurance restoration work, or was it?
Not really. I'm from San Diego, so we don't have insurance restoration
So
work.
you don't, yeah.
I mean, we have fires that blow through, I guess.
Right.
But we don't really have like roofing claims back there. So that was a whole new field for me. And we actually had a good conversation, my wife and I, about whether or not we wanted to go that way or if we wanted to go back into more focusing hardcore on real estate. And it was kind of went back to the core competency thing, where real estate just made sense because of what I've been doing since at that point, for a while. So let's just focus on that and build that part of it up.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, here in DFW, to have a roofing company essentially be able to do 7 figures without doing insurance restoration work, I mean, that's pretty hard to do.
It's a pain in the ass. Sorry, Ryan.
I mean, because you were essentially doing like cash jobs for flippers.
Absolutely. So yeah, our basic business model was doing volume construction for more or less new and semi-new investors, because there's nothing special about construction except for managing the process and managing the subs. So we specialized in that kind of niche market. We did well enough at it, I guess. I mean, we made money at it, of course.
Yep.
But there's a lot of different conversation, really. But there's a lot of just internal struggles, and we talked about this before the thing too. Internal struggles with really leveraging that kind of company, where you have that many different moving pieces. It goes back to core competency. If you want to put on 500 roofs a year, I think that's easier than renovating 50 houses a year.
Absolutely. And one of the things, so I was essentially the same thing, roofing contractor, general contractor. For me, I made the comparison. I felt like being a GC was almost like being a wholesaler. Whereas, you had the motivated seller and then the end buyer, you're the middleman. As a GC, you have your client, and then you have your subs, and you're the middleman.
You're basically a business broker kind of in either one, aren't you? I mean, you're a labor broker if you're a contractor, but the same thing, you're a, not broker in the legal sense of the word, but you're taking labor, you're marking it up, and you're managing that labor, and that's the value that you bring to the equation.
And so that's why, for me, it was such an easy transition for us to go from being a contractor to becoming a wholesaler, because I already saw the connections as what we were setting up in our systems and our processes in our business.
Absolutely.
So when you had the 7-figure year moving forward, how did that translate from, hey, we're semi-crushing it as a roofing contract over here, to let's get into real estate investing again?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because if you have 5 to 10 jobs going for other clients, how do you wrap that up? Not wrap it up entirely, but how do you kind of wind that aspect of the business down and really start focusing on another one? Because it really goes back to, we all have the same 25/8 in a week. It really goes back to just how can you leverage that time the most effectively. So it didn't put us in a cash crunch, but we had a period of time, probably almost 3 to 6 months-ish, where we were making less money than we wanted to, because we were kind of splitting our focus. Because on wholesaling, we didn't just start door knocking and sending out flyers. We approached it kind of the same way as construction, I guess. Like, what's the path of least resistance to get us deals that make sense? And in that, it kind of meant that we had to ramp up the back end stuff.
Right. So that it's very difficult. Like you said, winding down one business and ramping up another.
Absolutely.
But for us, what was actually, looking back at it, is kind of sad. It didn't really take us that long to start making more money.
Oh yeah.
Because we were actually not good contractors. I mean, it was just we did not enjoy that business.
No, it's a tough business. That's maybe come back and talk contracting. That's a great profession, by the way.
Right.
But it is a difficult business.
It is, and you have to have a passion for it and talent in it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's why it's especially here in Texas. It's one of the easiest companies to start, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's essentially, outside of being a electrician or a plumber or an HVAC guy, I mean, if you just decide you want to call yourself a general contractor or a roofing contractor, I mean, you can literally just show up and say, I am now a roofing contractor.
You don't even need to print business cards.
Right.
No, I was a licensed contractor in California, and you have to go through a test, like a 2-part test, both trade test and a business test.
Right.
I came out of Texas like, all right, I probably ought to get my license. Let's see what it takes. Oh, it takes a business card? That's kind of scary, but what the hell?
And so what are your thoughts when, now as an investor, because I always find this funny, say you're talking to a general contractor, and he says, hey, I'm a licensed contractor in the state of Texas. Do you ever approach that? Do you ever ask him?
I don't bump into it too much because I don't talk to a lot of GCs, honestly, because we still have the subs. It's funny, we do about the same volume now in construction for ourselves and for select clients that we kind of source as we were doing in construction. But when I see it on a Facebook post or on something like that, once in a while I'd respond or get like just kind of bristly, I guess.
Right.
But it cracks me up.
I mean, it is worthwhile to bring that up and sometimes ask the questions, because those are the contractors that could potentially hurt an investor down the road. Because,
Absolutely.
I mean, it is misleading. I mean,
No, absolutely.
there's not a license. I mean, there are for electricians and plumbers and HVAC, but outside that, there's not. I mean,
No, exactly.
and those are the people that can really put you in bad positions as a flipper, you know. And
I wonder if they mean licensed in like different cities, because usually if you're doing like a job that requires permits, you have to be registered with the cities. Maybe that's what they mean. I don't like giving them a benefit of the doubt. Is that fair? Not really.
That's giving it's a lot of benefit.
That's
of the
going too
doubt,
far.
right? So, anyways, guys, I'm sitting down with TJ Kosen today. We'd love to answer any of y'all's questions that y'all have for TJ or myself.
Hey, what's going on, Yale? Saw your name pop up.
So today we're kind of talking about the fact that moving forward into 2019 and really focusing on like a core competency in your business compared to the paying attention to all the shiny object syndromes that are out there, like falling into, hey, I want to wholesale, flip, rehab, owner finance, and do Airbnbs. I see people talk about that all the time, and it's really focus on one thing, master it, become a master of that strategy, and then move forward in your business to other strategies. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we made in titanium was when we were really crushing it wholesaling, and we got a property under contract that we could not sell.
Okay.
And at the time, I was so opposed to having any sort of failure in our business, even as much as, hey, we contracted this property at the wrong price and we need to drop it.
Gotcha.
I mean, every wholesaler needs to do that at some point
Yeah,
in
of
time.
course.
But instead, I decided, hey, let's flip a house in San Antonio, Texas, without having any boots on the ground in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
That ended
How'd
up
it go?
costing, we lost well over six figures on the flip.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
What'd you screw up?
Everything. I mean, we did everything on the house like 4 times.
Hey, that
and
happens.
I talk about this all the time, either on here or on the podcast, because I want people to understand and learn from our mistakes. Like,
Absolutely.
don't fall into that. Fail forward in your business, but our failure on that should have been dropping the contract and realizing where we made the problem on the acquisition.
No, absolutely. And you know what's, I guess, kind of a fine line too for newer investors that don't understand that mindset. The other side of that coin is don't lose a bad deal because you can't wholesale it.
Right.
Too many times you contract something, and we do this all the time. That's kind of how we kind of bumped into wholetailing, really, where there's reasons why you can't wholesale a good house, or maybe it's a bad house, but there's reasons why you can't wholesale a house that you'll make money on if you have a different exit strategy. And that's really where you can build on the core competency. Your core competency, maybe it is wholesaling, because you have a system that works really well. But you build on that. What's next door to that? Wholetailing. What's next door to wholetailing or wholesaling is it's flipping, obviously. But this is just a great example of how you can kind of laterally move close to what your main business focus really is.
So let's talk about how our director and producer can mute their computers. So let's talk about wholetailing for a second, because you bring that up, and I think it's very easy for wholesalers in a changing climate to decide, hey, I'm not selling property, so I want to take it down and wholesale it.
Right.
In your company, how do you make those decisions on, we're going to take this down, we're going to wholesale it, and what do you consider a wholesale compared to an actual flip?
Yeah, we get that question all the time. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Basically. So let's look at a couple of examples of ones that we have wholesale, and maybe one of the ones that we kind of accidentally got into. It was a good little house that we just couldn't wholesale because of a couple of reasons. It needed a couple month lease back.
Right.
It doesn't kill the deal, but we had it contracted at a great price. And we had 2 showings, but I got tired of basically pissing off the old dude that was living there. You don't want to keep going back and back, and he's kind of starting to scratch his head like, hey, what's going on here?
Right.
And again, be honest with him up front, tell him what you're doing, but at the same time, don't look like you're stringing them on.
Right.
And we figured, we can wholesale this thing, maybe make $3 to $5K, but look at where the market is. If we close on it, sit on it for 3 months, have him move out and then clean it up, we'll make a lot more than that. We ended up making $28,000 on a deal that we couldn't wholesale for.
And when you say
giving
clean it
away.
up, is that actually just cleaning it, or
This
are you
one it
doing
was.
flooring, paint?
Yeah, no. I think wholetailing is kind of a spectrum.
Right.
Maybe a flip is something that you just blow out and make amazing. And I think wholesaling is a spectrum. So it can go from just stick a sign in the front yard and hope it sells, to maybe you paint it, maybe you dust it off. This particular one, we took about 3 dumpsters worth of stuff out of there,
Gotcha.
and it didn't do anything else.
So when you're analyzing a wholesale property and you come in, say it has carpet, is that something that you actually want to clean? Do you make the decision on,
Yeah.
carpet's pretty cheap, we can go ahead and replace that? Because that's always been one of our biggest issues when it's wholesaling is, if we start doing anything, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, and, I think it's, for us, I guess, I don't do the same volume that you do. I think it's almost deal specific. What makes sense
Right.
for that house, in this neighborhood, in this market? And that really goes down to kind of why I liked originally apartments instead of houses, because with houses you really have to know what makes sense in this area.
Right.
And maybe one area it makes sense to do a paint and carpet job, and maybe that's a flip, but you're not shooting for kind of shooting for the top.
Right.
Maybe it's something that you just clean up a little bit. So the answer is it depends, in my
Gotcha.
opinion, in my experience.
And then as far as when you're going to do a flip compared to a wholesale or a wholetail, how are you making the decisions on when you're actually going to wholesale something to I'm going to flip it?
Sure. Again, depends on the house. The only deals we've ever lost money on are ones that we've had loans on, and the ones that we've tried to flip. So just food for thought.
Right.
It depends. Obviously, on flipping, you look at what's the days on market. I think is probably almost the most critical.
Right.
And okay, I used to do stuff in San Diego, and you can do a $500,000 house out there in a neighborhood that has 10 days on market back in the day. You do in a $500,000 house in Dallas, maybe once in a while you'll bump into a neighborhood that has low days on market, but in general you're looking at more days on market the higher price something is.
Right.
So that's actually one of the first deals when I broke my back that we lost money on, where we didn't really understand that dynamic, because stuff just moves back where I'm from.
There you go.
At the time did.
So our buddy Dave Heel says, boots on the ground, skin in the game locally, or F no. Yes,
I think that's sound advice.
Yes, I completely agree. Obviously, as we learned our lesson the hard way on that. Have you tried to do anything remote or virtual?
We're thinking about it. We're thinking about maybe San Antonio a little bit.
Yep.
I'm not sure what remote and virtual is versus kind of your business model.
Yep.
It's kind of like wholesaling. Where's the line? And
Yep.
we haven't figured out exactly how to cross that yet.
So see, for us, we basically took away the being remote out of it.
Yeah.
And by having an actual skin in the game partner that's local, boots on the ground, I don't feel like anything that we do in other markets is now, hey, I'm doing it virtually or remote, where, I have somebody there that's just as much as a vested interest in it as we do. And so a lot of those issues that we had with that San Antonio project are now eliminated.
Sure.
But that's failing forward, but it cost me an extreme amount of time and obviously finances to move that property, and it was a hard lesson to learn. So that's why I always talk about it on things like this, where it's like, hey, don't make those mistakes.
Yeah.
So now where you are in your business, you're primarily focusing on rehabs and wholesaling, or?
Pretty much. Obviously, I guess if we're out of money, we'll wholesale something.
Right.
Because sometimes you got to get some cash in. But it really is the best way, in my opinion, to kind of maximize and leverage your time and make the deal make the most sense.
What does your team look like now?
So in the office, it's my wife and I and our marketing guy.
Okay.
And then pretty much everything else is subcontracted out.
There you go.
So our marketing, we do various things that everyone does different things for marketing.
Right.
We subcontract a lot of that out, and then on the construction side, again, we still have the construction company. Back in the day, we had 2 or 3 guys that would work for us doing drop-offs and all that. Now we have one that's more part-time, and then we really use the same subcontractors that we sourced in the construction side to do our deals in-house.
Gotcha.
And it works. It works well for us because they know they're getting paid, and we know that they're going to do a competent-ish job.
Right. Do you feel like there has been a drastic change here in DFW from an acquisitions and a marketing standpoint from, say, the last 6 or 7 months in like the climate of the market? Have you felt any kind of shift there?
Yeah, and how much of it's a cyclical slowdown in November, December, January that just kind of slows down versus
Right.
how much of it is actually a dynamic change in the market. I think 2019 will be a little informative for how that works. One thing that I guess maybe a little concerned about is it's been a great market for the past 3 years.
Right.
If you buy right and you do your homework right, generally you make money.
Right.
It hasn't always been that way. Traditionally things sit on market maybe 45, 50, 60 days. And people, for the lack of a better term, I guess, have gotten a little greedy with, hey, if I do a nice job, it'll sell.
Right.
As opposed to, well, if I do a nice job, it should sell. And it doesn't mean that it's a fundamentally flawed market or even a declining market. It just means that things change a little bit and you got to change kind of your dynamic.
Absolutely.
So internally, I guess, how we're adjusting that ourselves is instead of, I think we're trying to get away from the high-end, like nice flips, like the really just blown out, shoot for the top of the market flips, and go for, okay, we make the house nice, but we don't try to compete with the top of what's selling in that sub-market. We shoot for what's pretty good, and maybe price it 10, 15K less than ideally we could get, and try to move it faster.
I think that's very sound advice. Moving forward into 2019, just like you said, there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know if
Absolutely.
that was just slow down for the season, or if it's actually a correction and a softening in the market. We're going to
Sure.
find out here
Yeah,
in early
absolutely.
2019. So that's very sound advice. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'd love to answer some of you guys' questions. So if you have any questions for me and TJ, drop them in the comments, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. Clemson is still the national champion. Alabama still got blown out. Sorry about that, Ryan. Just wanted to remind you.
Roll Tide.
Anyways, we're sitting down with TJ Kosen today, and we're discussing moving forward into 2019, kind of what we're doing internally in our businesses to prepare for either what we are thinking could be seasonal slowdowns or potentially a softening in the market, and how we're preparing for that in our businesses. Matt Smith asks, what do you look for when hiring your contractors? I think that's a great question for really both of us, because that's something that we have both done as general contractors and as investors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's more of a philosophy almost than a set of kind of checkoff lists that you look for.
Right.
And it really depends. There's a big difference, isn't there, between a GC versus a crew that knocks out paint and tile.
Right.
We haven't hired a GC in probably 5 years. Why would we?
That's a very smart decision on your part.
Yeah, I mean, people that are GCs, they definitely provide a service, but it's a lot tougher to control the uncertainties on the investor
Right.
side. And on the other side of the coin, that's kind of why we got out of doing volume-based construction, was for the contractor itself. It's hard for them to actually manage their risk too, so they have to be careful as well, which kind of inherently creates a bit of a conflict in just the
Right.
process.
At the end of the day, for every one subcontractor that's done a poor job for me, there's been 10 GCs that screwed me over one way or another. I mean, you can stop a subcontractor from screwing you over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's having a project manager or boots on the ground to go check on the project on a regular basis and be like, hey, you're not doing this correctly. Whereas a general contractor can screw you up financially,
Yeah, absolutely.
not managing the subcontractors well enough, and plus overall they're more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And going along with that, on the other side of the coin, a bad investor can mess up a contractor too,
Yep.
because a newer investor doesn't know that if a contractor is providing float, the contractor's not the bank.
Right.
The contractor they have a cash flow, to manage themselves.
Right.
So they have to make payroll on Friday. A good contractor has to make payroll on Friday. A bad
Right.
one, a bad one ends up on Facebook.
True. But I think there's, before you jump into a project and with any contractor, set the expectations of how the payment is going to be executed, and you need to be on the same page.
Yeah, I think so.
As the contractor and investor, it needs to be spelled out exactly how the contractor is going to get paid, when they're going to get paid. For me personally, I like to pay just like I'm a hard money lender.
Makes sense.
So when a specific line item is completed, then I will pay you for that work based off of what you quoted me.
I think that's a good way to go, and I think even taking it one step farther back than that, because we like to see a lot of kind of shaking responsibility in the real estate industry on all sides, and that's natural. When something goes wrong, you know, it's maybe not our fault. Maybe we didn't do anything wrong per se.
Right.
But at the same time, if our name is on the deed, or if our company name is on the deed, it's our property. It's our responsibility.
Right.
So I really like to say, what is it Grant Cardone says? He says, everyone wants to be the boss, but no one wants to write the paycheck.
Right.
Everyone wants to have the glory and the pat yourself on the back. My wife says, what does she say? If you want to be the man, you have to be a man. That's a good term, maybe a little masculine oriented. But what that really means is, if you want to, if you want to get the, if you want to have the pat yourself on the back thing, you have to take responsibility when stuff goes wrong. So absolutely, contractors can be bad. A GC can screw you over. A bad paint crew can, I don't know. I've had subs that I've used where the floor in the hallway goes this way and the floor in the bedroom goes that way. I was like, come on, guys, come on. And I still, by the way, that crew I actually still use. Turn it the way it's supposed to go.
Fix it.
Like, oh, I didn't notice. Stuff like that happens.
Right.
I think newer investors tend to blow things out of proportion, where it's easy to say, man, that's really wrong. Yeah, it's wrong, but is it a big deal to fix? And is it something they did like wrong maliciously, or just because it happened? So going back, I think to mitigate that is really what we do anyhow, is we provide a scope of work for what we expect. When we were doing volume construction, we would provide a scope of work that basically detailed down to the doorknob what would happen in a property. And if it wasn't on the scope, it didn't get done. That's how we protect ourselves on the construction side. So we turn around, do the same thing on the subcontractor side. We do that scope now for houses that we do ourselves, and we provide that to the subcontractor. Say, look, here's everything that needs to get done. Obviously, the stuff that's not you is not you. If you're not the flooring guy, if you're not the carpet guy, I'm not expecting you to put in the carpet. But if you're the paint and tile and hardwood floor guy, then here's how it goes, and here's what you're getting paid for these jobs. And that puts responsibility on the owner, where if we miss something, if we want a bunch of outlets in a room. We just had a great example. A bunch of outlets in a house were that far off the baseboard, or like short baseboard, outlets are right here or whatever. And we're putting in big baseboard and put the outlets normal level. That's not a paint and carpet guy job. That's an electrician job. But if we'd missed that, a new investor is going to come in and say, well, my contractor didn't see it, it's his fault. Not really. It's your house. It's your scope. It's your responsibility.
Completely agreed. When you are hiring subcontractors, who is providing the materials?
Right. All the time, us. So on our construction side, we provide the materials. On the subcontractor side, in our internal flips, we provide the materials, because a bunch of different reasons. Basically, the most important one's control. The second most important one's pricing.
Right. And then, so when you are hiring a subcontractor, let's just say paint, you're providing the paint and any other prep tools or materials that they need.
Yeah.
When do they get paid out? Is it upon completion?
It depends. We have a pretty good relationship, and we're not doing probably the volume that you are, so we could probably tighten that up some. We basically pay on a percentage of completion. We have a couple guys that we pay still by the day. So it kind of depends on the crew. Generally, for the most part, the safest way to do it is percentage of completion.
Right.
So if you're paying, for example, whatever you might be paying, $2 to install flooring, whatever, that's kind of in the middle. Maybe you paid $150, maybe you pay $3. If the floor's half in, you pay half, if they need to get paid on Friday. If the floor's all the way in, you pay the rest of it. I
think that also goes back to having a relationship with your subcontractors and when you're paying out.
Absolutely.
There has to be a level of trust there. Also, if you do construction for any sort of time, you realize everybody really wants to get paid on Fridays.
Which is fair.
Yeah,
they show up on Monday because they don't have any money.
Exactly.
Because they drank it all already.
Right. But it is also important to make sure that you protect yourself in your business, but also feed your guys and make sure that they want to work for you, they're motivated, but set those expectations up front. When you have your subcontractors, do you have any kind of written agreement with them? or is it more of a handshake deal because you've done so many deals with them?
The second one. We started off, and by the way, I'm not saying you shouldn't do written agreements. I think they're important, especially when dealing with that. We have subcontractors we tell get started, and we'll tell them what we're paying them later. But that's a relationship that's been built up over 4 or 5 years. A new crew, we're trying them out. Obviously, we all have to try out new crews in different markets. You give them the scope. You say, here's what we're paying for this job. You don't ask them how much you want. The amount they want is always, whatever they can get.
Right.
But you say, this is what we pay for this job. And in that, I'm sure you know the same thing, you have to be reasonable with what you're paying.
Yep.
If you're paying, here's a great example of flooring, if you're paying 50 cents a square foot to install laminate, maybe you have a badass that knows what he's doing, but he doesn't know his value. More than likely, you have some guy that doesn't know what he's doing and does know his value.
Right. And I also think, even though, depending upon your relationship with a subcontractor, because we have the same thing. I mean, we have guys where I don't even ask. I'm like, hey, 123 Main Street.
Do it. Yeah.
Go do it. And one of those times that came back to bite me in the ass was with my roofer.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
that's usually pretty straightforward.
I know, it was. But what had happened is a hailstorm had come through. And so he went from $45 a square to $70 a square.
Yeah, that happens.
And I get it. It's, supply and demand. His demand was way up.
Yeah.
And so I don't do that many roofs anymore because it's really only on our flips and rehabs. And I sent him a text, hey, 123 Main Street. He goes out. I'm expecting $45 a square. And it was 70. And I'm like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah, and the onus is on, and that, whose fault is that? It kind of is what it is, really.
It kind of, but then at the end of the day, I have to point it back to me. Hey, that's my fault for trusting that his price is going to stay the same forever.
And you're talking about 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about 2 years ago. No, that was your bad.
It was. I mean, I was so out of the roofing game. I was like, hey, we have a roof that needs to be done. I'm just expecting it to happen. But
no, and if something. If a sub randomly raises prices by 2x or something like that, and it's not kind of a market-based thing, then we cut that sub out. We had a window guy that did the same thing, where he was reasonably priced to install, and then he basically doubled it in a 3-month time frame.
Right.
Like, man, you got to go.
Right.
I'm sorry.
The roofing side, I kind of understand. Massive hailstorm comes through. Of course, the demand
windows,
goes up.
I don't get that. A window's a window.
I don't understand that.
Exactly.
So, let's talk about this, because if you don't want to share some of this, you don't have to. But for the sake of transparency and people not really talking about this very often, are you financing your properties with private money, hard money?
Yeah, all the above.
So
all the above.
When you do hard money, because we do a lot of hard money.
Yeah.
And the rehabs are escrowed. Are you ever concerned about the fact that you have, say, 2 or 3 subcontractors that want to get paid on Friday, but you can't pull the money from escrow yourself?
And
maybe this is a problem I have because of volume.
It's more of a volume. Yeah, probably. It's definitely a problem that's very common in the real estate industry.
Right.
And on the construction side, we bumped into it more than now. I don't want to say over leverage, because that's an overused term. We don't use that much leverage. So generally, we don't necessarily escrow the actual construction aspect of it, because we just don't leverage that much. Or if we do have a construction escrow, we have the capacity to fund basically 100% of the rehab in-house, and then get reimbursed by the lender when we get around to it.
So I think this is important for us to talk about, because I think there's a lot of people that watch these shows that maybe have never Jeremiah says the Alabama defense did the Bird Box Challenge last night.
I figured you were getting into something really important.
This is very important, and we're still talking about how Alabama lost last night. But let's talk about what we're talking about as far as rehab budgets and what this means, because I think some people, it's not talked about enough as far as if you're going to go flip a house, and where are the rehab funds coming from? If you're using private money, if you're using a hard money, and when are those payments actually released? I think some hard money lenders out there, like Kelly Smith at Easy Street Capital, does a great job of coaching newer clients and letting them know. But other times, I've had people that I've wholesaled properties to where they're like, hey, I just signed documents where I borrowed $50,000 to rehab this house, and my contractor wants $5,000 to get started.
Is that reasonable?
The hard money lender
Yeah.
won't give it to me.
Exactly.
Well, what do I do?
You know, and that goes back to develop your core competencies. If you've been in real estate a while, I don't think you bump into that problem.
Right.
Maybe don't jump into, without a mentor or without a partner, maybe don't jump into doing a flip,
Right.
your first deal out the box. The easiest way to not have that problem is to not put yourself in a situation to have that problem.
You know, some of the newer people in this industry, I'm going to give a couple of shout outs to some people that do a great job of utilizing Facebook and the Facebook groups to ask questions.
Absolutely.
And now I see them doing great things. Are Marcia Young, Shannon Glazer, Sarah Pinnock. These are a couple of people that I've just, and it's funny, I didn't even realize that those are 3 female people. But I think naturally women have a less of an ego to ask questions,
I think so.
ask for help.
It goes back to, like I keep saying, how don't start how I started. I just made all the mistakes
Right.
and figured out what worked because we're kind of arrogant.
Right. It's funny you say that. I can think back of the amount of times that we have made mistakes because I did not want to get off the persona that I didn't already know the answer.
I completely agree with that. And I mean, that is kind of the problem that you have in the business where you want to, you want to be in charge, but at the same time, you have to be humble enough to kind of know what you don't know.
Right.
You have to know that there are certain unknowns in the process, and it's okay to have those.
Right.
But figure out what they are.
So one of the things that you talked about before the show is this this new, I'll call it an epidemic, that is breaking out in
Which
the
one was that?
real estate investing world, which is you have wholesaled 10 properties and now you are, I'm going to get into multifamily.
Yeah, we did talk about that for a minute. It goes back to the core competency thing. With, going back with the construction side, I think we probably did about 150 houses for investor clients,
Right.
more or less. And often we'd bump into, oh man, we're going to go do, our target is to do 1 a month. Well, how many have you done? Well, this is my first one. Oh, let's get through our first one.
Right.
And it's great to have big goals. We have to have huge goals. We
Right.
talk about that on, Propelio or on the stage or whatever. But you have to have goals that are intermittently realistic and able to be obtained. And that's one thing that a lot of investors really don't see. Where, instead of leveraging and expanding from our core competency to something related, well, I want to go have 500 units in the next year. Well, how many do you have? Well, I rent my house.
Right.
Nothing wrong with renting your house. Nothing wrong with that. But how many real estate properties have you dealt with? How many tenants and toilets have you dealt with?
Right.
It's just how do you leverage to that extent? And I think the easiest way to do it is by starting not small, but starting in one niche and then building from that niche.
Yep. And I think you brought up a great point on making sure that you have some kind of mentor or network surrounding you.
Absolutely.
And not only like Facebook groups, but literally like how many phone numbers do you have where you can pick the phone up and they're going to answer no matter what time of the day it is, and you can say, hey, buddy, I've got a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
To help you out in that situation, because I'm almost ashamed to say it, and most people I think probably find this to be crazy, because now I'm always out here on these shows and the Propelio meetups and the podcasts and things like that. But there was a point in time where I did not do any networking at all.
I was the same way.
I was
Absolutely.
scared to do it.
I just didn't want to.
I was scared to give off this persona that I was some badass that knew it all.
Yeah.
And then I show up in front of somebody and someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer. It's a lot easier to hide behind a keyboard.
Who
right?
are the players in the local DFW market? I don't know any people that are just jerks.
Right.
I don't think I know a single one of them that's actually doing any kind of volume that won't have a lunch with you. Maybe they'll only give you an hour, but they won't sit down and
I mean, Austin,
at least have a
Austin Good's a
conversation
jerk.
with you. Well,
Nah.
he's got the car, he's got the car
I'm
to back
just
it up.
kidding. I love Austin Good.
I haven't met him yet, but I saw him at a meetup. I think I shook his hand. No, but seriously, I don't think I think that's probably why we struggled the same way getting going, was we had that aversion to asking people for help.
Right.
And mentor is a big fancy word that implies paying someone $3,000 for something or something like that. Nothing wrong with the people that make that viable.
Right.
But a mentor is some guy that you call up and say, hey, what do I do here? Like, I don't really know how to deal with this situation.
A mentor could simply be your buddy who knows more about one specific strategy or topic than you do.
Absolutely.
A great example of that is recently we had several properties that we wanted to cash out refi and then owner finance, and it was multiple properties at once with different banks and in different situations. And so I had never done it at that level before, so I reached out to Jason McDougall, and Jason mentored me through the process. Whereas I think there's been a couple of times where the roles were reversed, where I mentored Jason on different things, and it's just about helping each other out. And I think the DFW market's one of the best in the country for that. So we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, final thoughts and some more Q&A with TJ Kosen. All right, guys, welcome back to Titanium Tuesdays on Propelio TV. Real quick, I want to touch base on something that I'm very excited about. That is, we have the DFW REI Meetup coming up on February 12th. Propelio has brought back the world's best REI Meetup again, and we've got all kinds of crazy things coming up here. We got Sean Whalen. We're going to talk about how to make shit happen. We've got Mr. Life in Air, and then also I have been asked to MC this, and so I'm going to do all of the wild and crazy things that Ryan normally does. My partner Cassie just gave me a look like, what in the world? I didn't even know this was happening. But the meetup is going to happen February 12th, and all of this is made possible. It's a great networking event because of Propelio. For you guys that are not currently using Propelio, please check it out. It's a great product. We use it inside Titanium Investments. Real quick, here's my best way I can plug Propelio, okay? Every lead that comes in immediately gets a Propelio CMA pulled, and that's what our acquisitions and dispositions people use. We also utilize the lead list in DFW, Phoenix, Arizona, and St. Louis, Missouri. They're currently expanding to some other markets. So if you're not utilizing Propelio, or if you haven't, please check them out. That being said, we're going to move on to some questions.
Perfect, let's do it.
Matt Smith said, what did it look like when you guys first started? Did you jump in and start flipping or wholesaling several, or just kind of babysit a few flips?
I think we both kind of touched on that. You want to go first?
So for me, we started off with one flip, realized that sucked. We moved on to wholesaling, and several hundred properties later on, we decided to do something else beside wholesaling. That, without doing those other, couple hundred properties wholesaling wise, we would not be able to do it. Here's the reason why. Every time we would wholesale a property to someone more experienced, I learned something. So I learned something from someone flipping a house or buying a rental. I learned how to do cash out refis. I learned how to do owner financing, not by watching videos or podcasts or anything like this, not taking anything away from the value in these, but there's nothing better than walking a property with an investor and hearing how they're going to utilize their strategy on a property right then and there inside the property.
Absolutely. I guess it's my turn. How do you pronounce? Mr. Gilbert says, I mentioned when I started wholesaling, took the path of least resistance and not through calls, door knocking. Can you share what that path looked like or the method used to approach wholesaling? In this business, it's no secret really that you either have time, money, or talent, and hopefully you have all three, but you only need really one to be successful. When we transitioned more from construction back to more hardcore real estate, we had money and talent, but not a lot of time. So we do almost all of our marketing online. It's everyone knows it's a fairly expensive way to do marketing, but it's inbound and it's something that is less time intensive than going out and putting up bandit signs, going up and knocking on doors. We do some of that now, but we outsource that. So that's again the path of least resistance. You have to pay to put someone, to pay someone to go out and put up a bandit sign, or do it yourself. But I like being in bed at 10:30, 11. I don't like being out in the middle of wherever you put bandit signs at.
Right. It's funny you bring that up though, because people do point towards, and I'm assuming you're referring to like PPC or SEO.
Absolutely.
Any form of digital marketing like that. A lot of people point to those being so expensive, and that's why they avoid that.
Absolutely.
But then when you really break it down, either cold calling, direct mail, even PPC, a lot of times there's not a huge variance between the cost per deal.
Not a whole lot.
I mean,
when you take time into account, especially.
Right. And that's very important because you have probably less leads coming in than we do when we cold call.
Absolutely.
But there's less follow-up, less time wasted, less CMAs being pulled,
Absolutely.
less follow-up, and probably less actual leads to convert an actual deal.
Yeah, I think so. And for us, that made the most sense. To leverage and go bigger, to do what you're doing, absolutely makes sense for your business model.
And I think that's very important for you to, before you start making these decisions on, and I'm an advocate for all of these forms of marketing.
Absolutely. And they all work, by the way, too. That's the thing.
Right. And that's proven across the country between many, many thousands of investors across the country using all types of different, and I mean, we had Donovan Ruffin on here a couple of months ago, and he's huge on bandit signs. And that's what he's most known for because he does so many. But then he talks about he's also doing pay-per-click. He's also doing cold calling.
Right.
And it's very important to realize that what he did is he mastered bandit signs, and now he's expanding into other forms.
Now, doesn't that go back to core competency too? Find, obviously every marketing thing works, but I'm going to send out 500 flyers and I'm going to knock on 20 doors a day and I'm going to put up whatever it is, 150 bandit signs a week. Dude, do something. Because you're doing so little of anything, there's not any way you can actually quantify how effective you're being in any one of those little sub-markets. So master one, get your core competency down with one marketing strategy first, and then expand from there. Or do it to get capital so that you can pay someone else to do the marketing for you.
Yep. And so for you guys, y'all chose the online version because it frees up your time, less time on the inside. Was that a decision made from failures on other forms of marketing, or was that like you chose that right from the beginning?
We talked to a bunch of folks that were doing different things, and we just kind of made the decision that there's a process for how to be successful, I think, in any one of those fields, and we were most comfortable with deciding to be successful in doing online marketing because we like the process of it the most.
Gotcha. Well, TJ, man, thank you so much for sitting down with us and taking the time for us. Do you have any kind of final thoughts or shout outs to anybody before we jump off the air here?
Let's see. Well, I'd like to definitely thank Ryan and Daniel for putting this together, for having me. Thank you, by the way, for inviting me on here. Just definitely want to give a shout out to Propelio. We'll be there. Obviously RJ will be there, but totally looking forward to the February Propelio event. Love all the Propelio events. Propelio really was kind of what got us back into marketing and getting more involved in the community, so we're incredibly grateful for that.
That's cool.
And in terms of shout outs,
what's the best way people can get a hold of you or do business with you?
Well, please follow Platinum Real Estate Mastermind on Facebook. It's a group. I post a bunch of stuff. It's not too spammy, and really try to talk about deals. Best way to get a hold of me, my phone number's on Facebook, so go on Facebook, find me first, and then call me if you need to. And those are probably two of the best, easiest ways.
And then real quick, just on a totally non-business related, why do you talk about leg day so much?
Well, you got a couple of reasons. One is the back accident. So anyone that's just now catching in, I was paralyzed, and I taught myself how to, my wife was integral in teaching me how to walk again. There's, I think, a picture up there. So I think Legs Day is very important. And then the kind of metaphor of Legs Day is no one likes doing Legs Day, but it's one of the most important ones. So
Yep.
you do the stuff that no one likes doing, and master that and be successful.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about your group is that you don't only post the pretty pictures or the checks
absolutely.
at the end of the day and the pretty pictures. You show it all the way. You have the hashtag pics or it didn't happen. And you literally teach and show others
Well, thank you.
how to do things from start to finish. And so I appreciate everything
The
that
good,
you do.
the bad, and the ugly.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So that being said, guys, February 12th, DFW REI Meetup, Propelio Meetup. It's going to be in Grapevine at the Palace Theater. We're going to have amazing speakers. Sponsors are going to be there pumping up their businesses. And then I will also be there emceeing it. Please go to propelio.com and check out that. And then also, our company, Titanium Investments. Just a update on what we are currently focusing on as a business. We are moving back to our core competency of wholesaling. You guys are going to see a ton of properties coming down the pipeline from us. Please check us out at titaniumprops.com, or you can reach out to me at rj@titanium.investments. All right, guys, that's our show. Tomorrow, Grant Teach Me Something, and we'll follow up with Iron Heels. There's say hi to everybody in the background, and we'll see you guys next week.